our top story once again, dairy farmers. They have formed a consortium comprising of several organizations from various parts in the country. It is in pursuit of reducing the plight that the dairy sector undergoes. And the players in the dairy farming value chain say that the sector has injustices. They are calling upon the government to create a better business environment in the country so as to bolster the dairy sector, which contributes 14% of Kenya's agricultural GDP. Farmers are complaining about the cost of feeds for their animals, which raises costs of milk production. Recently, the dangerous levels of aflatoxin also found in maize is causing jitters in farmers in relation to producing quality milk, since maize contributes to the animal feeds as well.
What I would want to urge the government is, if we can have a way that they're able to control the feeds that we feed our cows, which of course it's spilling over from the maize. You heard the challenges we had in the maize sector recently. Maize is actually what we use as a concentrate also in feeding our cows. The same aflatoxin levels that were reported in some of the processors of maize is the same thing that is also trickling down to the milk. And that's why even the quality-based payment system of getting prices on milk will be challenged by the aflatoxin levels.
In terms of pricing, we really look forward to see how, and we are asking the government to chip in. First of all, we have got a lot of importations of milk coming from our neighboring countries, which are affecting our industry.
In any business, you'll find if it's profit-oriented, sure that their costs are as low as possible. What is happening? We're finding our neighboring countries, who we have found in the trade protocol, are producing milk at a very lower cost as opposed to us. So in Kenya here, the lowest you might find someone producing is least kabisa, it might be 26 shillings. Yet in our neighboring countries, they're producing even as low as 8 shillings.
Well, we want to get into our discussion with Ken Gishinga right here on Week in Perspective, and we'll start off with the fuel, because consumers and motorists are set to spend more at the pump after fuel prices for the month of November, even as the season was closed. According to the latest prices for Nairobi, the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority, Super Petrol goes up by 2 shillings 54 cents. Diesel recorded a rise of 2 shillings 65 cents. Kerosene users are the hardest hit, with a litre of kerosene going up by 2 shillings 95 cents. Similar hikes were seen in Mombasa and Kisumu as well. And the jump in prices is set to affect the cost of transport and food items in many parts of the country. All right, Ken, thank you so much for being with me. Prices that were released, and we're seeing hikes with prices all across the board. Why do you think this is so?
Well, they said the increase in costs is because of the average landed costs have gone up. Obviously, this is not a good thing for businesses, because every time fuel prices go up, cost of food, as you've said, cost of transport, the cost of doing business becomes quite expensive. I think this is a time energy economists really need to come into the game and really give Kenya a direction in terms of how can we buffer ourselves against international oil price dynamics. Because unless we do that, I think we'll always be at the mercy of these other variables that affect the Kenyan economy.
Is there really any way to buffer ourselves?
Well, we know we are already producing our own oil in Turkana. The question is, can we refine it? That's always been a controversial topic. They've said it's not, there's no cost benefit towards that. But I really think we have to really think of how can we be energy dependent? How can we really play into renewable sources of energy? And I think every country is doing that right now. And unless we do that, I think we'll always be at the mercy of these forces.
Okay, but also there's a lot of difference when it comes to, you know, the hike that we were seeing earlier. It was by a greater margin, of course. So do you think this is still optimistic? It's within the range of, you know, it's reasonable?
The problem with this type of increments, they actually hurt the poor people disproportionately more. So the middle class might be sort of like they can accommodate it, but people at the bottom of the pyramid, people who every shilling counts, tend to get hurt more, especially when you look at kerosene and diesel. So we have to think about that, because I think sometimes we think it affects everybody in the same way. But there are people who might have to walk on Monday morning because they cannot afford the new matatu fare or the new bus fare. And those are the majority of the people in the country. So we really have to think of that from a macro perspective.
Absolutely. I think aside from fuel, the other story that we really wanted to discuss was the Chummy write-off. Now, if we look at some of the factors there, earlier in the week, troubled retailer Chummy had some respite after the Kenya Commercial Bank and the Cooperative Bank agreed in principle to write off 655.5 million shillings. That's in combined outstanding credit. So first of all, if we look at the factors that surround that and some of the terms, KCB is Chummy's largest creditor. They've agreed to waiver off about 365.5 million in accrued interest and penalties, additional 44% when it comes to the lease facility as well. And if you look at Cooperative, they've actually waived about 40%. Cooperative has done that of its total outstanding loan, that's principal and accrued interest, and they've written off about 109.1 million shillings. So the immediate settlement of 10% of outstanding 163.6 million after the write-off is due by 28th February 2020. That's for Cooperative. All right, and those were, of course, some of the figures that we saw coming out of Chummy. This is something that Chummy, I'm sure, has very much appreciated. They believe, as the CEO Mohammed had said, that they're on their way to once again finding stability and being able to accommodate their day-to-day costs and bouncing back. Is this a major move in that vision?
It is a positive development. Chummy is an iconic brand, and if you look at many of Kenya's iconic brands, whether it's Chummy or KQ or Mumia Sugar, they're really straddled in debt. And the inability to meet their expenses is because a lot of their revenues are going towards servicing debt has been a major problem. So I think this is one area that financial services players can really come in, because these are institutions that will be here for many years. Restructure that debt, they'll get paid back at the right time. So I think this is what we need to have for businesses to be able to really be able to grow. So I think it's a positive development, and I really hope that strategy can apply to all the other iconic brands that are really struggling under debt.
I think when you talk about debt, and like you say, there's so many brands in Kenya, whether we're talking about our national carrier, whether we're talking about Chummy and others that have not been able to bounce back due to this. What is the best strategy when you find yourself as a company in that lurch, when you're so deep in debt that the losses keep accumulating year on year? What would you say would be the first measure to buffer yourself?
It's a very tough place to be for a CEO, but I think the best thing is to first have a sit down with your creditors and give them a good 5-year strategy and say, this is something Chummy can do, this is something KQ can do, but we need your support. We need you. We've been there for 50, 60 years, so we are not going away. If they can make that argument to their creditors, then you might see the terms becoming better. Another strategy is they could look for international development partners who can refinance their debt to a much lower cost. That's another strategy. But that's that's what keeps most CEOs awake during the night. How do you meet all your obligations, yet you still have business expenses? You have to pay rent, you have to pay salaries, but you have this huge elephant in the room called debt. That, I think, is really one of the hardest things for any CEO out there.
Okay, and we'll continue this discussion, but before that, we have another story, and we're going to Nakuru. Donkey owners in Nakuru County have petitioned their county assembly to ensure the closure of donkey abattoirs, and we're going to take a look at that story right now for you.
It is lunchtime at Sokomjinga in Kaptembwa area. Susan Anyango carefully packages omena for her customers. The price of the commodity has continued to rise, and this has not been easy for her to pass on the costs to her customers.
Biashara iko chini, tunalia. Juu omena imepanda bei, fare iko juu. Kijaribu kuelezea customer aelewi. Hii mkebe sasa inauza hii 300, na hii ni 100. Saa hii inauza 150 juu ya bei yake. Na kitambo hii ilikuwa 50, hii ni 100 na hii saa hii imeingia 300 na hii ilikuwa 200 kitambo.
Siku hizi hakuna biashara. Siku hizi uchumi unakuwa chini. Sio kama zamani. Maana zamani ukiuza kama sukuma ya 100, saa nyingine nakupatia 100. Lakini leo ukipata shilingi 20 pesa kubwa sana.
Next to Susan is Evelyn Odhiambo. The mother of 5 narrates that her business could go down soon if the situation persists. She notes that a crate of tomatoes costs 3,500 shillings during former President Mwai Kibaki's rule, but it shot up to 8,500 shillings after the 2013 general elections.
Pande ya biashara imekuwa bei kali sana. Saa hii kama machungwa tunanunua 3,400 na hapo kitambo tulikuwa tunanunua 2,200. Saa hii hata makastoma saa hii wanateta sana, machungwa 10 hawachukui. Tunajaribu kuwauzia wanataka 55. Sasa uchumi imekwama sana. Sasa machungwa saa hii itembei. Pia nyanya imeenda bei kali sana 8,500. Makastoma pia nyanya unapepa sanduku moja itembei, unauza siku moja 2 3 wiki moja, ile stoki uchamaliza.
The purchasing power of her customers from the low-income areas of Kaptemba slums continues to decrease as a majority live below $1 a day. A majority of the tenants here depend on Kenya's staple food, ugali, for lunch and supper. But currently, a kilogram of unga is retailing at 60 shillings, up from 40 shillings. The transport sector has not been spared.
Hali ya uchumi naona imedorora sana, iko chini. Kitambo bei ya mafuta ilikuwa chini, but sasa hii bei ya mafuta imepanda. Customer anakuja tu na pesa ile tu tulikuwa tunambebea nayo, tujaongeza bei. Kwa hivyo tunaumia sana pande ya hii sekta yetu ya motorbike.
Ukiangalia maisha ya kitambo na saa hii pesa haina maana. Ukiwa na 1,000 ni kama uko na 100, kwa sababu vitu zimepanda na pesa bado ni ile.
Uchumi wa nchi umesoroteka vibaya sana, umeharibika. Sisi kama malaymen hatuwezi kujua ni kitu gani kinafanyika kule juu, lakini there must be something wrong somewhere.
Professor Lawrence Kibet, an economist and lecturer at Egerton University, says that the high cost of living was not only impacting negatively on the common mananchi, but also on the investors.
The resulting move of some of the investors to move out of this country to other neighboring countries is primarily as a result of, increased costs of living. The wage rate in Kenya is relatively high in the region. And that makes even cost of production to be actually very high. So as a result, coupled with the fact that the government is increasing its borrowing as a result of increased spending, and we expect that to continue, especially in the servicing of loans, that is more of external, we are likely to have negative impacts on not just the common mwananchi, but overall the economy.
Thank you very much, Joanne Lating, for that particular report. And she was, of course, talking to people in Nakuru, and everybody is decrying the cost of living right now from that particular story and the people she spoke to. I'll bring it back to you, Ken. Of course, that was something that, another story that we had during the week. People keep saying that times are tough, there is no money. And really, what is the underlying reason for that? Because there's so many factors we talk about every day, but for somebody to, sit in a market and say, my produce is not moving, I don't have money, things are tough. What is the greatest factor really that led us to this point?
I've always said our monetary policy needs to be looked at because that's what determines how much money is in circulation. I've said that the amount of money in circulation in this economy is far too little. We have about 500 billion shillings in circulation. And if you look at, we have a population of 50 million people. That's about 10,000 shillings per person. That's very little money. So I think we focused a lot on inflation targeting, but we really need to really reduce interest rates. Let banks lend more, let entrepreneurs create jobs, because we are not creating enough jobs. Most of the growth is coming from the public sector in terms of roads and railways. But if you look at the private sector, and that's what creates jobs, the private sector is not doing well. So we need to shift our strategy towards putting more money in the hands of businessmen who have an experience in creating jobs. And when jobs are there, people don't feel the pains of inflation as much. The problem we have in Kenya is inflation goes up, but the wage levels remain the same. So you find people who have been in the same job for the last 5-7 years, earning the same thing, yet the cost of living has been going up and up. So every year they are almost getting worse off. So these are some of really, in economics, or what you call the Phillips curve, that looks at the trade-offs between inflation and unemployment. We need to talk about that. We need to have our central bank think about that, because unless we move forward, we're going to have a jobless growth, which is a very dangerous thing for a country. Okay.
And another thing that a lot of people constantly question is, what is the correlation of inflation to somebody, just walking around on the road, trying to do their thing and trying to make a living? How would you explain that to somebody who is just, somewhere trading and, like I said before, a common wananchi? How would you explain how inflation affects their day-to-day life? Because it's something that a lot of people, fail to piece together.
Well, the definition of inflation is really looking at the cost of a good or a service today vis-a-vis last year.
Okay.
So, for example, the cost of this table this year versus what it was last year. If that cost has gone up, that's what we consider inflation.
Okay, and what factors then lead to that?
Oh, well, it's a variety of things, because let's say if you look at, for example, fuel, for example, it could be international dynamics. For example, what we discussed earlier about some things like about the landed costs going up. So things that are happening outside the borders of this country. For example, if some issues happening in Saudi Arabia, which is the largest oil producer in the world, they will infiltrate into the Kenyan market. The cost of fuel will go up. The cost of food will go up. The cost of transport will go up. So fuel is one of the areas we really have to really look at, because it really drives inflation of other products. And that's why I said we really need to think about a long-term strategy for energy. Because if we can contain the cost of energy, we can be able to contain the cost of many, many other goods and services in Kenya.
Okay. Away from that now, thank you for explaining that, because I'm sure people would like to know just the basics of that, which sometimes it goes beyond what you have already learned, or, in school and things like that. Because sometimes, people say when you're in school, they should teach you how to file your taxes and how the economy works and things like that. But when you enter the real world, those things just hit you in the face and you're like, wow, I should have known about that.
It's absolutely true. In fact, many writers have written about how there's almost a disconnect between what is taught in the university world, in academics, and in the real world. And it's about time we look at our curriculum and really be able to embed some life skills into the curriculum, so young people can really know what are the basics to be able to lead a life in Kenya. I think that would be a fantastic thing for our curriculum.
Absolutely, especially when it comes to economics and the economic know-how that you people tend to, of course, have the expertise in. But we'll continue our discussion. We'll take another story now. And construction works have begun for the 400-kilowatt Konza Isinya TL project by the Kenya Electricity Transmission Company Limited. The construction of the substation will mean that local and international investors can now invest in ICT, health, tourism, and agriculture sectors. This as they are assured of reliable, efficient and affordable power supply. It will evacuate power between Konza and Isinya with an aim of improving supply within Machakos, Makueni and Kajiado counties.
Electricity or power is an enabler to the Big Four agenda. All whatever the investors who will be coming here, the first priority they will be looking for is, do we have power? And then, do we have reliable power? Therefore, I want to say I am happy that today we are commencing the work of the substation, and you have been told it's one of the best substations ever.
And it means then for Konza Technopolis, anybody that will be here, we can, I hope, guarantee 100% renewable energy, that geothermal can come here. So that as the country moves on towards 100% renewable energy, Konza can be one of the first. And we're making sure that we have the latest technologies, we have the best in class, and therefore if we have the same in terms of power, that will actually be great.
Chinese government is committed to, as usual, to supporting Kenya in developing technology and realizing industrialization, and will make continued efforts to contribute Chinese wisdom and strength for the development to Kenya.
And of course, we have been talking about energy as well with you, Ken, another development there that we're seeing. But even as we, wrap up our discussion, I think another thing that we really wanted to talk about was the Kisumu port and the economic implications and, of course, the economic optimism that surrounds the port or reopening. What are your thoughts?
Well, the government says that it's going to be part of the blue economy strategy that was launched last year. It's going to encourage tourism. It's going to create better access to transport. I think it's unfortunate we've not seen any documents, and I've always said a lot of Kenyan projects, we never really see the documentation in terms of the facts, the assessments, the social impacts, because unfortunately a lot of people have been displaced for that port to be built. We've seen a lot of traders whose property has been destroyed. So I think as we think about project management as a country, yes, these projects are important, but also having environmental assessments, social impact assessments, I think those are the things that the government ought to share more with the public, and also having some public participation. So we hope that it's a project that will deliver its intended benefits, but I think it's another plea to government for future projects to be able to involve the public more, because only then can you get optimal solutions that are a win-win for everybody.
All right. And even as we wind up, it's important that you said seeing the papers, because another story that we just ran through today was the KQ nationalization that now is being focused on quite a bit. And, first we saw KQ wanting to take over the airport, which the CEO, when I sat with him during one of our previous shows, said that that wasn't the intention in the first place, and now the nationalization is what is going to save KQ in one way or the other. Your thoughts finally on if that is going to bring our national carrier back up and very much high in the skies?
I think the story of KQ has been very complex. I think there's that idea that if you look at the Gulf carriers, they're all nationalized. If you look at Ethiopian Airlines, it's nationalized. But when I look at the problems of KQ, I don't really tie them to a particular structure, whether it's private or public. It's more of inefficiencies. It's more of pricing costs. So for me, yes, it could be a solution, but I don't necessarily think it's the result of it being in private hands. So the question is, can KQ figure out? Because if you look at the New York to Nairobi route, it's now doing very well. It's almost 100% booked. They've reduced the inefficiencies, and it's broken even. It was supposed to break even in 12 months. It broke even in 8 months. So it shows you that it's not really a question of whether should it be public or private, but can they get the efficiencies right? And I'm very impressed with that route. It's doing very, very well as it is. So for me, a lot of KQ's problems are not really tied to that structure, but it's more of management efficiency, if you ask me.
Okay, and like he said, actually, with the Nairobi-New York flight, the fruit of that was supposed to be after a certain period of time. They were not expecting it to immediately just pull them up and, be the silver bullet anyway. So that's interesting that you said that. Thank you so much for joining me, Ken. As always, your expertise is very much appreciated.
Thank you very much. Have a good weekend.
All right. And with that, of course, I'll share the same sentiments with you. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. Have an amazing weekend and stay with us right here on KTN News to keep you informed and up to date. My name is Malika Kazia.